All right, let's do it. Thank you for inviting me here, Taylor. Does everybody see my screen here? Is this working? Okay, cool. I'm a quick introduction to me. I'm a complete digital marketing nerd. And it's almost to a fault. So today basically what I'm doing day to day is I'm digital marketing, meaning specifically paid search, paid social. We do a lot of Google ads, a lot of Facebook ads, stuff like that. Quick intro here. I'm the CEO at Bateman Collective. And also Lever 11. Lever 11 is an ad tech company with predictive analytics for paid search, kind of something that we spun off of Bateman Collective and we use internally for our own clients. And what I really love is the data-driven side of the marketing. Um, I'm really proud to be involved in about $50 million a year in digital marketing spend across different clients between Bateman Collective and Lever 11. And yeah, just nerd out about a lot. So I was, when I was thinking about what to present here, I was thinking, what kind of principles can I take that I've learned from marketing, and maybe talk a little bit about how those apply in our marketing, but also how those apply in business in general, because I know not everybody here is a marketer. You guys are looking for frameworks for your business. And frankly, there's some things when it comes to understanding the data, when it comes to a marketing funnel, that I think a lot of businesses could really use. So that's my main focus today. Is I want to talk about the marketing funnel, which is a huge piece of what we're doing, and can likewise be a big piece of your business. I think this matters to you potentially if you're running any ads, of course, because that's what we use it for. If you measure performance of anything in your company using the funnel, if you don't, then you probably should. And the reason is every bit of revenue that comes to your business could come through some sort of funnel. I'm not talking about like click funnels and websites and stuff like that. I'm just talking about like a simple metric funnel. Right? There's going to be people that are introduced to your business. From those who are introduced to your business, there's a smaller number that are going to take a certain action, et cetera. Or if you feel like your company's revenue can be like a roller coaster, that's something that I get frequently, especially in the B2B world where you're dealing with higher ticket, lower volume type sales. A lot of companies really feel that, and oftentimes it's just because they don't fully understand the funnel. So before we get too deep into this, I want to just give like a case study of where this goes wrong, right? This is a fun one. This is a case study from Metro Trains Melbourne, down in Australia. There's a campaign that they once did. So essentially what was happening is people were getting hit by trains. And this company or this government organization kind of looked at it and said, well, we got to do something about this. So in response to that, they made this ad campaign that I'm going to show you. For the sake of time, I'll just show you the first little bit of the video, but it's likely that you've seen it at some point of your life. And then we'll kind of talk about the results from it. Let me know if you can't hear the audio through the YouTube.
Not hearing anything.
You can't hear that? Is that right?
Right.
Yeah, I can't hear it.
I don't know how to connect that through Zoom.
You may need to, I think you need to stop the share and then reshare it and optimize for video and include sound. There's two clips.
That is very smart, Dale. Although it is relatively inconsequential. So maybe I'll just tell you what happens, because we probably don't have time to watch the whole the whole video anyways. Essentially, this is a video called Dumb Ways to Die, and it's a song about all the dumb ways that you could potentially die. And you may have seen it at some point where there's just all these different ways that all these different figurines or whatever you call these guys are dying, and they all basically by the end of it, it basically says the dumbest way to die is getting hit by a train. Something simple like that. So this is the campaign that they had in response to that. And you can look up the video if you want later. It's mildly amusing, I'd say. I don't think it's the funniest thing in the world, but different people have different senses of humor. The world, it turns out, thinks that it was very amusing. So here's some results from this campaign. This video had over 150 million views, 46% awareness in the target audience. So you could say, well, those views were just everywhere, not necessarily in specific places. I would argue that, like they tested in their specific areas in Melbourne where people were supposed to know. And 46% of the people knew of this campaign. They had over 90 million pledges to stay safe around trains. Huge impact. This campaign won 28 ad awards at Cannes, making it the most awarded ad campaign in the entire history of ad campaigns, which I'd say is no small feat at all. More than $60 million worth of earned media. which, to clarify what that means, is essentially the impressions that this got, not from paid ads, but just from its organic viral reach, was worth over $60 million if you had to purchase that. But this last one's interesting, a 13% increase in people hit by trains, which is exactly what this whole campaign was aimed at not doing. The whole goal was to decrease the number of people hit by trains. This is an example of a failed funnel. This is an example of a campaign that was not aligned with the end goal. And while it was very interesting, didn't actually produce results. And the reason I'm talking about this is because this is the number one problem that I'm seeing with companies' digital marketing as I'm doing audits recently. And we'll talk about some case studies here. But to talk about like some of the practical things here, this is a funnel, right? This is, for example, an e-commerce funnel. You have impressions, people who see your ads. From those, some people click. From those, some people who actually load the landing page, and then some people might view a product, might add to their cart. Of those, people will initiate checkout, and of those, people will purchase. So I'd highly recommend, if you don't have this set up in your business, which it might seem so simple, but so many companies don't actually have these metrics in mind, you need to figure out what are your funnel metrics, and more importantly, your funnel ratios. There's basically ratios at every step of the funnel, and this could be different, what the funnel looks like for each business, that basically show how many people are getting from one stage to the next. And in this case, that's like, for example, CPM, CTR, landing page view rate, all the way down to a purchase rate, which would, for example, be the number of people who purchased divided by the number of people who initiated the checkout event. So that's the basic level of the funnel. Like I said, you should definitely set it up in your business. One of the things that I'm excited about that we've done recently that's been really helpful for us is a new visualization when it comes to the funnel. A lot of times people are just looking at like, oh, 30% of the people who initiate checkout end up purchasing, and then they think, well, that sounds like a low number. Something's wrong. Really, that's not a super data-driven way to look at it. I think that benchmarks, of course, are helpful for us to understand where things should be, and also previous performance from a company. So this is my favorite visualization that we use with clients now. This is for Facebook ads specifically. And basically what we're doing here is we're taking a couple core funnel metrics, and there's tons of other ones, but this is just like the 4 that I think we'll look at first. And we'll number one, we'll average the day's data with the previous 30 days data. So based on if the line is going up or down, you can see how the performance for that particular day compares to the running average of the previous 30 days. But it makes it so it's not super volatile, so you can actually see trends. Then we'll index these values, so they're all at a point of 1, at a point where we want to compare results from. And we'll view how those ratios change over time, because some ratios will be high, some ratios will be low. What we care about is where are they compared to where they usually are. So this is an example of how we can tell a story with this kind of data. Like, for example, the story told here is this e-commerce company was doing fairly well around this time. As we got closer and closer into Q4, conversion rates started to increase, which is typical for Q4. At the same time, CPMs started to get worse, right? So there's this counteracting balance that was happening for the company. But then at a certain point, CPMs, specifically right after, after shipping was no longer available for Christmas, conversion rates started to decrease and CPMs are worse. And then that's essentially the story of this company. And they were at a point at the end of December where ads were not performing. And you could blame it both on ad costs and also in decreased conversion rates due to seasonality. So there's a ton of things that you can learn in your own business. For example, we found out that pages have started loading longer because of changes in hosting. We found out that a change in landing page that seemed insignificant had a significant impact on a company's performance. All kinds of things we found out from this visualization. So I highly recommend that you could use something similar to visualize how your funnel works. Mistake number 1. So I just want to talk about 2 mistakes that I'm seeing companies make, and then I think the Q&A portion here will probably be the most valuable thing. But mistake number 1 that I'm seeing companies make are choosing the wrong metrics. Here's how I view, why you should choose certain metrics over other metrics when it comes to a funnel. At the top of the funnel, we have 2 things, right? 1, we have volume, and 2, we have vanity, meaning these metrics don't necessarily align with what matters to the business. At the bottom of the funnel, on the bad side, we have data sparsity, meaning sometimes you just don't really know if there's a trend, because you can see trends when there aren't trends because you're dealing with sparse data. And number 2, we have alignment. At the bottom of the funnel, we find the things that actually matter to the company. For example, this is one of the errors of that Dumb Ways to Die campaign, where the results didn't actually align with what was trying to be accomplished. a common problem that I see is companies focusing way too much on this top of the funnel. What are we doing to get more and more people in? And that's obviously detrimental because it doesn't necessarily align with the company, because those are vanity metrics. Likewise, oftentimes I see companies that are focusing too much on the bottom, and especially as business owners, we can get really tied up in the sales side of the business and get really emotionally involved with the roller coaster that can be, especially when you're dealing with those sparse events. So sometimes we can look at things and be like, why is revenue down this week? When instead we should be looking at, for example, in a B2B situation, where are our appointments at, or where are our qualified leads at? Because we need to get a little bit closer to the volume side, because we're dealing with data sparsity issues. So if you have that roller coaster, not due to seasonality or something, but due to random variation, you need to track higher in the funnel. Whereas if you're not actually getting the outcomes that matter for your business, you need to perhaps sacrifice some of that volume for some alignment. And really, I think it's best to know all of these metrics. Where companies go wrong is they focus on only one, and it never tells the whole story. Mistake number 2 that I see companies making is failing to qualify or losing focus. You could say this was another error with that dumb ways to buy campaign. This is a graph from an audit that we recently did. And what this is basically showing is for a given audience, there were 4 different ads that were running. And some of these ads were performing on different levels, right? So on the left-hand side here, we can see ROAS. On the bottom here, we can see spend. So the idea is the ads that perform better, you should spend more on, whereas this is backwards, right? And this is, by the way, auto-optimized by Facebook, meaning technically it should be doing better. But obviously this ad is the best ROAS ad. And then we had a couple of these ads that were also doing fairly well, although not quite as well. And then on the bottom here, we have the spend, and this problematic ad happened to be the one that was spending by far the most. If you took the difference in ROAS between this problematic ad and these other ones, and you put it across all of the different ad sets, we could see basically in this account, this company was losing out on $80,000 a week of profits because of misoptimizing towards this problematic ad. And the problem with this ad is that it doesn't qualify. I don't think I can reveal a company here because it was just an audit that we did with them, but I'll describe these ads briefly. This is in the home security industry. And in one of these ads, this high ROAS ad is the kind of ad that I don't think management loved. It was the kind of ad that wasn't super interesting, but it was clear about what the product is. It was direct and to the point, and then qualified and converted. It had conversion-oriented copy. On the other hand, the other ad was high volume, and this was really clever. It was interesting to everybody, even those who aren't interested in home security. The value proposition is clear, but the product isn't. It doesn't qualify, it engages, but it doesn't convert, which is why it confuses Facebook's algorithm. This is a super common problem that we're seeing with our clients, is that some of these ads that people really like, management really likes, the kind of ads that you might see in the Super Bowl, for example, they are very interesting, but the problem is they're interesting to everybody, not just to a particular group of people. And by being interesting to everybody, not just the group of people, it throws off the optimization of these advertising platforms. So it's so important to qualify. Here's another example of where this was important. People ask me often about this case study. This is some work we did with Gab Wireless, where we basically decreased their customer acquisition cost by 20% while scaling their budget from $2,000 a day to over $30,000 a day in just 2 weeks on Facebook. And people ask, like, how is this possible? A lot of this came down to these different ads. Here, we moved away from this video 1 and into stuff more similar to this video 2. Because what happens is, especially in Facebook ads, and this applies to PPC as well, this can apply to even sales, right? What happens is this ad on the left here was super interesting. Everybody loved it, super high engagement. Facebook wanted to push it really far. This ad on the right here was only really interesting to those who actually wanted to buy a phone for their kid, because it was more purchase oriented. It was more about the product, and it caught attention, but not in such a way that it's fun for everybody to watch. What happens is Facebook will see who responds positively to an ad and show the ad to more and more of those people. So a huge part of this case study was just changing the types of ads, because the biggest problem that we're seeing in a lot of accounts, Facebook ads now, is that Facebook's optimization technology is favoring engagement above purchase conversions. And the reason is Facebook wants stuff on its platform that people like. But the algorithm also optimizes for events along the entire funnel. The way that Facebook's algorithm works is it looks first at what ad causes more people to look at it and which kind of people are looking at it. And if we find more people like that, and those people are more likely to click through, and those people who are more likely to click through might be more likely to purchase, et cetera. So Facebook's algorithm is often fooled by these kinds of things. So there's a couple of quick case studies. I think it's important that we qualify and convert. So a couple of takeaways here. Number one, if you aren't measuring your funnel that generates revenue, you should start right away. You should know those KPIs. And you need to take a step back and know what's the best metric to measure success at each stage. If you have a team in charge of the website, if you have a team in charge of ads, for example, I highly recommend that you keep them accountable for the conversion rate on the website. If you have a team in charge of media buying, keep them accountable for that conversion rate. If they're in charge of getting sales, they should also be in charge of client retention. I think that every stage of the funnel needs to be responsible for the stage below it, and that's the way that generates the best outcomes. And then the last thing is consider how you can pass the right people through each stage. Oftentimes we get trapped into this thing of whatever ad has the most people clicking on it is most likely to generate the most revenue. However, we find that there's oftentimes, for example, between click-through rates and conversion rates, an inverse correlation, meaning ads that get more people to click also generate lower conversion rates. So I think at every stage, the most important thing is how many of those people who theoretically could get to the very bottom of your funnel are passed through by whatever you're using at that stage of the funnel. So think about that qualification because it makes a huge difference, especially in the world of digital ads, although also in sales. So that's what I have for the presentation. I'm sorry, I haven't seen the chat here. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can answer some questions here.
Thanks, Brandon. That was awesome. I love the takeaways, and I love the example of the simple funnel. I'm just going to jump into things because I wrote the first question in the chat, but please everybody throw stuff in the chat while Brandon's answering. I just wondered if you have any suggestions on tools that you use or people should use to track those metrics that you showed in the example funnel.
I think the great tool if you're looking at your website in general, for example, could be Google Analytics. It's not going to be as good when it comes to tracking with cookies, although the whole world of tracking with cookies is about to get turned on its head from iOS 14 anyways. So we don't know exactly how that's going to change. We know it's not going to be quite as good as it once was, but it's going to be, it still could be relevant. What we're typically doing is we're tracking this in the platform that we're managing as much as possible. So we will pull in these metrics about how many people are getting to each stage of the funnel, as long as those things happen online. If they happen offline, a huge opportunity that you have for optimization above your competitors is actually pulling that data into these platforms, which through the Facebook conversions API or through the Google conversions API or other means, you can kind of pull that in. But yeah, we're often using cookie-based tracking through the platforms, and you don't need to use paid tools for these things unless you're getting really advanced, working with very large budgets, and you need some type of multi-touch attribution models that are beyond what's typical for Google Analytics, which there are options at that point, although I find that they're overkill for a lot of companies.
Very cool, thank you. Maxwell, do you want to unmute yourself and just go through some of the context of your questions?
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Just a quick 2 questions that I thought of while you were speaking, Brandon. One was like so much content on the web. Is SEO still a thing that matters when it comes to advertising, when it comes to these funnels? Can you just elaborate on how you approach SEO, given that we're into an internet that has so many different options? And then a follow-up from that, based off something later in the presentation, was really that the platforms that you use to do advertising have different incentives than you do in terms of closing potential leads or deals from advertising.
Yeah, is that second one more of an observation? Is that a takeaway or an observation? Yeah. So as for SEO, I'm not an SEO master. We're kind of like a paid ads company. We don't do any SEO. I can tell you that SEO is not dead. There's a lot of content on the internet, but I have a lot of clients that do really well off of SEO. But it definitely, the number one mistake I see people making is they just don't give it nearly enough time. You have to be ready to invest for a long time when it comes to seeing SEO results. And you have to have a solid strategy when it comes to knowing what you're trying to get. Because so often I see people like saying, I want to rank for these keywords, and then they rank for those keywords, and then they realize that doesn't actually align with their business goal. So really the best way that I've seen SEO done recently is we'll do like pay-per-click campaigns and really figure out what our conversion rates are on different keywords and things like that, and then use that to inform the SEO strategy. I highly recommend that if you can, because the problem is if you jump straight into SEO and you don't do pay-per-click first, then you're just guessing about what's going to be good for your business. If you do pay-per-click first, you can jump straight to the top and figure out if something works, because otherwise you have to spend 6 months trying to rank for that keyword before you realize it's not actually the keyword you want to rank for. Whereas with PPC, you can figure out maybe in a month, is it a good keyword for you that's producing good results? And then if it is, then you can know that it's a good SEO keyword to tackle as well. So that's kind of my paid ads strategy to SEO, obviously to a hammer, everything's a nail. And that's kind of how I view it as the best way to tackle it. As for your statement about alignment with platforms, a year ago, I would have disagreed with you. I would have said Facebook and Google, what they want to do is give advertisers the best results. And that perfectly aligns with your goals. More recently, we've seen sensitivity from Google specifically that's a little bit counter that, where they're more focused on leveling the playing field when it comes to paid search than they are on allowing competitive advantages, so to speak. So I would say that in many cases now, these platforms are starting to be a little bit more against advertisers. So it's becoming more and more important to know how to use the platform in such a way that is going to get you the best results, because the platform doesn't always have that interest in mind. These platforms, they want good results for their clients overall, but they want the difference between the best advertisers and the worst advertisers to be minimal. They don't want people hacking the system, so to speak, because every time you get better results, you're usually hurting someone else's results. So that's kind of what's going on with that. So that could be a long discussion as for like how you manage those different things. I could rant for like 2 hours about why what Google's doing recently is kind of unethical in my opinion. But it's they own 70% of the market, so you got to kind of do what they make you do.
Cool. Thanks, Brandon. That's very insightful. I love the idea of jumping into SEO strategies with some knowledge based on pay-per-click. Let's see, we've got another. Usman, you said any videos, blogs, resources you can recommend where I can learn more about this? Any other context you want to share or specifics, Usman, that you want to unmute yourself and talk about?
Yeah, so I just thought maybe there's not, because I really like the idea of analyzing a funnel, but then there were a couple of things. One was the ratios. I wanted that elaborated, especially the part where how do you benchmark against according to what industry we're looking for, because the ratios will shift, hopefully, or I don't know what I'm talking about, and you can just elaborate on this part. Yeah, and then also
Great question.
Any blogs or thought leaders that I could maybe follow that would generally just help.
Yeah, good question. I'd say benchmarks are really tough because they're so different for each company. So you can look like, and they're all different based on different things and stuff. I'd say the most powerful benchmark that you have is your own company. Looking at where you were previously is probably the best data that you could ever have. So that's where it's like, it's hard, like when you're starting out, to know like what's normal, and you can work with the company that can maybe say like, based on the price of this product, or based on the kind of lead magnet we're using for your B2B service, or whatever it is, like this looks kind of normal. But it's never as simple as just searching like average Facebook cost per click online and like that actually meaning anything. I've never seen that turn into something that actually like has a benefit to whoever was searching it. So you have to, I'd say you definitely just consult the experts when it comes to those. But then once you have those metrics for your own company, your own metrics are your best benchmark. As for where you can go to learn more, I recommend, like if we're talking about the social ads specifically, Digital Marketer is a great resource. They have a podcast called Perpetual Traffic, which is probably my favorite podcast when it comes to paid social advertising. And they run a lot of high volume ads and really understand what they're doing there for a lot of different types of companies. So I think that's a great resource to start on the paid social side. On paid search side, there's not as many good resources. I don't know if it's just people like Google's just not as fun as Facebook for a lot of people. It's a lot more complex. I kind of am partial to Google. I kind of like it a little bit more, but I'm an oddball in that sense, and I haven't found any great resources. Also, I just kind of view Google really differently than most people do. So all the resources I do know, I don't love. because I just don't agree with them as much.
So where's your blog or podcast, Brandon? You need to own that market.
I'm too busy just owning the results for my clients. I don't have time for that podcast.
Good answer. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff, do you want to jump in with your question about agencies?
Yeah, I've seen the stuff from Harmon Brothers saying, hey, create a viral ad, but what I'm hearing you say is your viral ad might not be the stat you want. So I just thought I'd see, when does it make sense to go for the viral ad versus the Gab focused ad?
That's a good question, and I don't know who's on this. I don't want to step on people's toes, because that ad for Gab that performed horribly was actually a Harmon Brothers ad. So there's I'm not trying to throw shade, but that's kind of I've worked with several ads of these types. What I can tell you is the circumstance where it would work more ideally is in a company that has a very broad appeal. Meaning it's applicable to almost anybody, because then optimizing for the right people within an audience and providing those conversion signals to Facebook is less important, because technically anybody could be your customer. As you have products that have more and more of a, yeah, exactly. And as you have products that have more and more of a niche focus or specific type of audience that has a situational reason why they would need the product, or has certain psychographics that lead them to purchase the product that aren't just super general to the whole population, you definitely want to focus more on qualifying with your ads. I can tell you can find, with all these viral videos, you can find more old case studies that are really good than you can new ones. I think the landscape has kind of shift with the way that the optimization works. And that's just my experience. We haven't had as much luck with that kind of stuff recently.
So I should put my patent viral ad on the shelf for now. The super broad.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say
audience
I would focus.
patent.
Yeah, I would say focus on like what we've been seeing work really well recently has been more user-generated content, native looking ads, the kind of stuff where you don't have to, like, yes, it needs a mastermind behind it. It needs to flow well. It can't be like a super shaky, but you can film it with an iPhone, right? You have to like think like, how can we make something that's amazing, but from a production quality standpoint, doesn't have to be incredible and qualifies first. The point is, someone should be able to, like, for example, in your video, they should watch the first 5 seconds. And if they are the kind of person that could end up buying whatever you are selling, then they should be all into it. If they aren't that kind of person, it's almost better that they don't care about it than that they do, because the fact that they don't care about it would give Facebook those feedback signals of that not being the right person for the ad. Does that make sense?
Yep. Awesome. Thanks.
That's interesting, Brandon. Just to follow up on that, and I might do a call out on someone in the group just because it might be an interesting case study, but Trevor Wood, I've seen posts from you more recently on LinkedIn, and I wonder, Brandon, if you have any insight on like LinkedIn posts, because what I've been seeing from you, Trevor, I think is really good, and it has a lot of good content, and you're kind of sharing the different benefits of products that you're offering. I just wondered, Brandon, if you have any insight on the LinkedIn front.
Man, I don't know. I know that LinkedIn as a paid channel, like we've done some stuff there, and it's definitely an interesting beast, very different from these other channels. So pretty much nothing I've said applies to LinkedIn paid. LinkedIn organic is I think a much better platform for most companies than LinkedIn paid is. And I would say that some of the stuff that I'm saying about qualifying here wouldn't necessarily be as true there, because I would imagine that the LinkedIn algorithm would look for things that are especially interesting. And that's where you'll see that a lot of the stuff that is getting shared more and more on LinkedIn, those posts that have tons of likes, tons of comments, and kind of go far beyond the organic reach of the person who originally posted them, have a more general appeal, because there's just going to be a higher viral rate if it applies to more people. Although don't take me as the LinkedIn algorithm specialist, but I think organic is a very different game than paid. With paid, we earn basically your ad should convert high enough that it doesn't need to be viral. Whereas when it comes to organic, you kind of rely on that virality. So it's just a completely different game. I would say a lot of what I said doesn't apply to organic at all.
Okay.
Yeah, Taylor, just to kind of go off of what you said, it was my understanding that LinkedIn is kind of needing more content, and so I don't know, they help spread your posts. I don't know, is that accurate or not? I mean, versus like Instagram and everything else where you're just getting bombarded with content. LinkedIn is kind of was different that way. So
Yeah,
is that true?
I think that's 100% right. Yeah, they say there's a content deficit on LinkedIn. That's where you'll see I have like 500 connections or something. Every time I post something, I get like 3,000 views on the post, which would be so opposite on Facebook. You have 500 friends, you're gonna like 10 of them will see your actual post because there's just so much stuff there. So that's where LinkedIn organic is amazing right now. I think it's a really good channel. It's not my specialty by any means, but I support it. I think it's like honestly a place where I'd like to focus if I wasn't so busy with everything else. So I try, but anyways, it's definitely a great place to go. Just not my bread and butter by any means.
Well, Taylor, thanks for noticing. At least someone's saying something about those.
Yeah, I see it, so I like it. I mean, it's cool. I'm a fan of LinkedIn, so it's nice to see your posts up there. We've got another question. Hallie said, what are the reasonable budgets for marketing for professional services or for products?
This is like the hardest question.
Hallie, do you have any other context or examples of what you're referring to?
Thanks. Obviously, we're members of different professional organizations, and a lot of the times the organizations will have their own ability to use their resources for marketing within your own small sector. But then if you're a professional and relaunching yourself, or else, if you have products, it's different directions to go in terms of when do you use your own organization's small bandwidth approach with their standardized viewpoints or SEO strategies. And when do you look to you, Brandon, and others to enlarge the field as well as to generate more than just the single service approach?
Yeah, well, great question. I'd say there's a right time for everything, right? Like my company doesn't utilize any paid ads, which you would say could be even considered hypocritical. I'd say it's because we understand deeply why a company would use paid ads, right? Paid ads, the place that it has in your company is typically that it creates some of the more expensive customer acquisition costs that you have. Like those organic referrals, networking, that stuff will generate stuff usually at a cheaper cost than paid advertising will. The real benefit of paid advertising is that it's a gas pedal for your business. You can kind of put on the gas and go to 10 miles an hour, but when that worked, you can then floor it and go 100 miles an hour. And that's the real advantage. And, if I'm like hiring employees to network and things like that, I can, you don't just pause payroll. Although I can sleep at night knowing that if I pause my Google ads, Google's going to be okay. Sergey and all those guys, like they'll be fine. So that's something to consider also. So basically the reason we don't use paid ads in my company is because we're already growing pretty much as fast as we can anyways. And there's no reason to take a higher customer acquisition cost than the other things that we can do that are much more simple and bring stuff in. The real advantage of paid ads is that you can on demand generate customers versus kind of getting them when they come. And you can scale significantly farther to fill in that gap in your capacity. So when I work with companies that have a larger capacity than they currently are utilizing, and they're looking to grow quickly, that's usually where paid ads have the best match for the company.
That's good, Brandon. I appreciate that. I think so. Sarah from Longship's comment, I think, is awesome as well, based on what you were talking about with learning your correct words. I think, Sarah, you do a lot of email marketing and automation. Is that correct? Are you seeing some data come back from that?
Yeah, so one of the big things that you can do, obviously, with virtually every basic CRM is you can split test. You can split test out what words are converting more when it comes to open rates, conversion rates. And I usually tell clients, if they're looking for the least expensive ROI on the on just knowing what words you may want to use when it comes to SEO. That is an easy one. If you are sending out just regular content marketing, that's an easy one where we can try different things. We had one client, he's in investments, and he insisted that something fiduciary is what you should do. This has to be in the subject line. And I came up with a subject line, Clint came up with a subject line, we all came up with something different. And wouldn't you know, fiduciary did get way more open rates, which I just thought, this is a jargon, ridiculous word that nobody is going to open on. But it turns out he had the highest conversions. It had the highest open rates. So it is one of these things where, as the business owner, first of all, you should always trust your gut, but then test your gut. And email open rates and conversion rates are just about your least expensive way to test those things.
Brandon, have you had experience getting data from email campaigns and using that like you suggested with pay-per-click campaigns?
No, we haven't. I think it would be good because that's a pool of data. I would worry about it on some potential ways, meaning like something could work great for email, but not on social, for example. Like they're going to be very different, right? So I wouldn't trust it blindly by any means. But it does give you information about how people respond to your message. Email is going to be a different channel. Like one of the biggest things about email is there's no machine learning in the background. So if you had, for example, a message that appealed to everybody and it was an email, it would be like assuming it appeals to your target audience and then some people, but still really well to your target audience, that's okay. Whereas on paid social, for example, that wouldn't be as good, most likely because it would confuse the algorithm. In email, there is no algorithm, so it doesn't really matter. So I'd say like you definitely want to take any data that you get from one platform when you're applying it to another platform with a grain of salt. But that being said, it provides an excellent starting point and it provides a good hypothesis. And when you kind of like mix it with the nuances of what you understand about different platforms, it can be, like a quicker way to understanding your test results for sure.
Brandon, have you seen, because this is something whenever we work in tandem with an advertising company, because we are not an advertising company, is we do find that email subject lines make also for good like title lines when it comes to various ads. Do you ever see a similar correlation?
I honestly haven't done a lot with that. I fully believe that though, because it's a hook of an ad, it's a hook of an email. So I don't. I agree with what you're saying. Just don't have a lot of personal experience.
Well, it sounds like we just need to use the word fiduciary in our ads and in our emails.
All the time, that boring word.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
It's fun to say.
Good job being data driven, Taylor. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. Yep.
That's
fiduciary
what
always converts better.
Yes.
That's right.
Brandon, maybe last question is Maxwell's. Maxwell, do you want to jump in with your question? Are you still here? Oh yeah, you are.
Yeah, I'm still here. I was just curious, Brandon, how can people who are going to engage with a company like you make sure they're getting a good deal? What do you recommend people to look out for when they're trying to engage firms like yours?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a lot of good firms. You want to make sure you're working with someone who like understands your business. Probably the biggest, like when we're auditing campaigns and we're seeing problems, and most often it's not that like this account is being horribly managed. It's that this account is being managed in a way that's not consistent with the goals of the business, because the agency hasn't taken the time to understand the business. So number one, I would say just make sure they like are more focused on understanding your business than they are and just like selling you. I would also definitely ask them, what's your client retention rate? Gold standard would be over 95% month over month. retention rate speaks volumes. You also want to see like what kind of companies they work with. Any company that works with enterprise clients only is going to have a stellar retention rate, just because those companies don't even know how to fire their agency. They're just so big and slow, and red tape everywhere. And it's like those relationships always last so long, even if the agency is horrible. As companies work with even smaller companies, like I'd say 95% might be really high for like a company that's generally charging like $500 a month or something. There's going to be a lot of churn in the low end of the market. So I'd say like in the range where I think most of you would be, where you're looking at maybe like $5,000 to $50,000 a month in advertising spend, something like that. Look for like that 95% plus client retention rate, and that speaks volumes as to the agency and how they perform.
Very cool. Great question, Maxwell. Well, we did go over time, but I just love to hear your thoughts. Brandon, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for joining. I will have this video up on the website, themiddayconnect.com, as soon as I can. And then Brandon, is it possible to get a copy of your presentation? Would you be willing to share that with the group as well?
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Shoot that to me and then I'll email it out to the group also. But thanks everybody. I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you next week.